it's like if you're doing these things, there's no way he's
Exactly. And like
Okay.
in 8th grade, I remember hugging a female classmate, and a bunch of guys like down the hall were like, "Oh, Tyler's hugging that girl. He's not gay." And I remember that very specifically.
Really?
And I really think that kind of pushed me into, making a false identity for myself to like just get through those years.
Welcome, everybody, to Getting Curious with Mitch. I'm obviously your host, Mitch Perry, and on this show, we talk to people who are passionate about what they do or believe and figure out what makes them tick. This show is also brought to you by the Aggie Radio Podcast Network. That's why we have this wonderful studio and microphone set up. But today, we have an awesome guest, one I've been looking forward to talking to for a while now, and he's just made it through some big accomplishments in life, career-wise and education. And everybody, it's Tyler Beardall.
What's up, guys?
So Tyler, why don't you tell everyone what you've been up to? I guess I should premise this. Tyler and I went to high school together. He was our student class officer.
Yep.
Right? And
Yep.
I was on the senior committee. And
Yep.
I was around Tyler quite a bit. Super popular, super cool.
Crazy. Whatever.
But he was a really cool dude. And Tyler, what have you been up to last little bit?
Well, just school and work. So right out of high school, I went to BYU Hawaii for a year. Came back, started at the U in the fall of 2016. And now I'm graduating with 2 bachelor's degrees.
Wow.
I work at the University Hospital as a patient relations specialist, so I kind of help people navigate their stay and figure out where to go for appointments and
Sure.
Different stuff like that. And moving to Seattle next week.
That's so exciting.
Which is really
man.
Crazy.
Way
yeah.
cool. What are you getting your 2 degrees in?
So my first degree is a bachelor's in English with a minor in political science. And then my second degree is a bachelor's in writing and rhetoric studies. With a minor in econ. So
wow,
kind of crazy.
That is crazy. And I remember in high school you were like the debate champ.
I was the debate captain. Yeah.
I remember you just walking around with trophies.
I was, yeah. I was flaunting it up. Yeah.
Oh, it was so cool, man.
It was pretty fun. Good times.
Cool. And you mentioned to me when we talked on the phone, the plan is to go to law school.
Yeah,
eventually?
the plan is to go to law school. So within the next year, that's when it's going to happen. I say that's when it's going to happen because it's going to happen.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
No,
it's come too far to just quit now,
no plan B.
Yep,
right?
no plan B. No plan B.
Well, that's so cool. Well, for those of you who don't know Tyler, one of the big reasons I wanted to have him on is Tyler, right after graduation, came out as gay, and I think it was at 2015 during the time when Barack Obama gave the executive order to legalized gay marriage, and me and a bunch of my buddies were leaving on their missions at the time, and and I think a lot of people didn't know how to take that, or because I don't think anyone hated you or whatever.
No.
You had tons of friends and people wanted to support you, but at least from what I saw on social media, it seemed like there was a lot of mixed feelings.
There were quite a few.
And I think it just kind of goes to show that in Utah, there's a lot of mixed feelings about that. I think most people have friends who are part of the LGBT community.
Yeah, everybody knows somebody,
Right. And I really wanted to have Tyler on because I think he has a very unique perspective. And I think I come from a place of knowing the statistics that in suicide, there's a huge suicide rate for that community.
In Utah especially.
Yeah, and it's no doubt that it's attributed to the church and the culture we have here, and that just makes me sick that people kill themselves and are even considering that, and I don't think they should feel that way, and I think there's a lot of things that the community can and should do to help, and I wanted to have Tyler on to hear his perspective and hear his story and hopefully gain some insight into some opportunities, in the future.
Yeah.
as this, issue isn't going to go away, and it's something that needs to be dealt
addressed.
with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Totally.
I agree.
So I guess there's a lot of things we can dig into, Tyler, but I think, why don't we start? What was your experience growing up? Did you always, were you always having gay tendencies, or, did you have to hide that, or what's your story, man?
Right. So I came out to my parents. I didn't come out to them. They kind of like nudged me out a little bit. My junior year of high school, they pulled me down to the basement. They were like, is there something you want to tell us? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Is there? And my mom, she was like, are you gay? And I was like, I think so. Yeah, I think I am. Yeah. And my dad, he was like, oh, I've known since you were 3 years old. And that kind of caught me off guard at first, because I was like, oh,
whoa.
Well, have I really known that long? Because I was just kind of starting to add some things up. And so I came out to my parents, but I didn't come out to my sisters or my extended family. And I didn't really officially come out until after we'd graduated. And I did that for a couple reasons. One, I was just tired. And the second, I was going to BYU Hawaii, and I kind of felt like I needed to be honest about myself before I went down there.
Yeah.
So I came out online, and then I emailed my future roommates at BYU Hawaii, and I was just like, I'm gay. I hope that doesn't change anything. They were really, really cool about it, which was awesome.
That's cool.
Yep. But yeah, I think the church had an impact on me coming out when I did later on. But I haven't really started to notice that until more recently.
Mm-hmm.
That since I've been separated from the church, I think I've noticed a lot more things that kind of trigger me in certain ways, or things from the past that kind of explain why I was the person I was when I was in high school, and and how I got there, and then how I kind of overcame that maybe fake person that I created, because it really was kind of that way. I don't think I was ever truly authentically myself, because I was just kind of struggling with my identity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of?
No, I bet. Yeah. And how long did you really struggle with that? When did you feel like you were repressing yourself or your true self?
I think I'd always known I was different. In first grade, I remember one of my classmates calling me a girl because I only hung out with women. And that was the first thing that really hit me pretty hard.
Yeah.
As I was like, what? I was like, what? I was confused. And then in middle school, people would call me gay just to bully me. Does that make sense? It was just
because of the way you acted?
Just because of the way I acted, or my voice. I had a really high-pitched voice in middle school. I think that was kind of also played into it a little bit. And so it was me going through maybe all of that torment to create a person that I liked and maybe thought people would like.
Uh-huh.
Does that make sense? So
meaning not your... So if it was you would have just played into your normal self and acted that way, but you felt like that was frowned upon.
So the person I am now would have reacted differently back then, of course, duh, right?
Sure.
But I think back then I was more concerned about being liked than I was being myself, and so I chose to be liked.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? To avoid even dealing with who I was and what my sexuality was.
Sure.
And dating lots of women in high school was a big factor, and that kind of pushed people away from that person that people were saying I was. Does that make sense?
Because it's if you're doing these things, there's no way he's
exactly.
gay.
And in 8th grade, I remember hugging a female classmate, and a bunch of guys down the hall were like, "Oh, Tyler's hugging that girl. He's not gay." And I remember that very specifically.
Really?
And I really think that kind of pushed me into, making a false identity for myself to like just get through those years.
I bet. So was it kind of a fear that if you, I guess, did you choose like, okay, I'm going to come out after high school, like that's just the best time? Or when did you kind of decide like, okay, I'm just going to push through and I'm going to come out at this point?
So, I don't want to drop names, so I'm not going to drop any names, right? But there is a classmate of ours graduated with us, and I knew him pretty well. He used to be in our like ward, and he came out, and I remember people talking about him, like, oh, I don't know if I can hang out with him anymore. What if he's got a crush on me? What if he's gonna stuff like that, right? And of course, you know, when you're like 15, 16, 17, you don't know what you're saying, but I think that kind of played into it a little bit too. But I don't know if I necessarily knew who I was or understood my sexuality until my parents kind of nudged me out of the closet.
I bet.
And that's when I started to really kind of piece things together. Just because I don't think I would have come out if they hadn't, you know, pulled me aside and been like, do you want to like talk to us about some stuff? And I was like, oh, I don't know, do I?
Right. And with your parents noticing that, how are they? I mean, obviously it makes sense, like they're your parents and they know you probably better than anyone. Yeah. But what was it that like made them notice or like want to nudge you out? Like, have you ever talked to them about that? Because I feel like that it sounds like they were supportive.
Yeah, super supportive.
Yeah.
Super supportive. I'm not sure what pushed them to like confront me about it, except for maybe just my mannerisms and the way I behaved. Like, I know my dad told me once that he thought it was weird that I was hanging out with all of these women and like having them over, but like wasn't super like into really dating them. Specifically like my friends in high school, like Morgan and Haley and just like that group of friends that we had. I think that was like a sign for my dad that kind of like clicked for him. And then also my mom has a gay aunt, and my dad's best friend in high school was gay, and he committed suicide a few years later, which was horrible. And I think that kind of opened my parents' eyes in a way. I know that my mom's parents were super accepting of her aunt, right? Yeah. And my dad, you know, having his best friend commit suicide was like a big event for him that kind of opened his eyes a little bit. Yeah. So I think they saw it in me, and they pulled it out of me with love, of course.
Totally.
Right.
Well, so it sounds like they saw what can happen if it's not handled.
Exactly.
Right. And so they saw the need to support you and help you be true to yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Which it sounds like a lot of people don't get that experience.
That's very true. I had a friend who went to high school in Park City, family super wealthy, and he had an inheritance from his grandparents. He came out and his parents kicked him out. He lost the inheritance, and then he had to live with his aunt in Bountiful for years. And that scared me a lot. I was really to have this idea that maybe your family would abandon you. Yeah. And people in our graduating class are dealing with that right now. Like one girl from our high school, she couldn't go home for Christmas. Like, wow. Just like really crazy stuff coming from like a place where, you know, you have these LDS families that preach about love and families. Yeah. And then to like kind of cut somebody off that way, that's scary. And I think a lot of people hide who they are to stay away from that or avoid that experience.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I bet. And what was that like? It sounds like you obviously grew up in the church. Mm-hmm. What was that like growing up in the church, knowing that you kind of had this secret?
The last 2 years, my junior year, my senior year, I was making some big life decisions. Like, do I go on a mission? Do I go to BYU Hawaii? And I think I went to BYU Hawaii because it was maybe expected of me in some way to continue, because all of my parents and on my dad's side especially, everybody went to BYU.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like, and all my cousins too. So it was like to continue that maybe tradition in some way. I felt like I had to kind of like see if I could make both lifestyles work. And then going on a mission was something that I had like prepared for. Yeah. And when I had my meeting with the bishop right after I came out, it was about going on a mission. And do I go to BYU Hawaii or do I go on a mission? And I my initial decision was to defer BYU Hawaii and go on a mission for 2 years. And in that meeting with him,
after you'd come out,
after I'd come out,
really?
And during my meeting with him, he confronted me about being gay and told me that maybe I wasn't worthy to be going on a mission, and so I went to BYU Hawaii instead. And so I think back in high school, it was more just trying to people please rather than doing something for myself. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And so I don't know if I ever really knew what I was experiencing until I left and experienced something different. Does that make sense?
What do you mean by experiencing something different?
So when I left BYU Hawaii, I left the church and started going to school at the U. And Salt Lake is more, what's the right word? Liberal maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. Sorry. Anyways.
Progressive.
Yeah, progressive, right? And my experience, even at BYU Hawaii, it was pretty progressive. I never had any problems being myself out there.
Because Hawaii is pretty liberal itself.
It was, and I think it was kind of a party school, so because that's mostly what we did. But being at the U, I wasn't really tied to those expectations or responsibilities. I didn't have to go to church every Sunday. I didn't have to go to seminary, and I think I was starting to see more of myself after that.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I definitely want to dig into that experience, but I'm curious because would you say, I mean, you said you were preparing to go on a mission. Like that was the goal. So I'm assuming then that you had a testimony and like believed the church was true at the time.
I did.
And
yeah.
So what was going through your mind when you've come out, but you believe this thing to be true? What was that experience like? What were the thoughts going through your mind?
I thought I could make both work in the ways that I wanted, not necessarily in a realistic way. So my idea when I graduated and I was going to BYU Hawaii was that I was going to eventually meet a man, marry him, have kids, and then take them to church, but just not be a member. Yeah. And in 2015, like October, that's when the church came out with that announcement that children of LGBT families wouldn't be able to be baptized. Yeah. And I think they reversed that very recently.
Did they? I haven't looked into it.
I could be totally wrong on that, but I think they did. But that was a big, letdown for me, because I really did want to make those two lifestyles fit with one another. Yeah. And then to have that kind of crushed in front of me was a big eye opener, I guess.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
because it was that was going to be your only option.
It was, and my expectation was never after I came out that I was going to marry a woman. That just wasn't going to be my thing. But I still do value family, right? And I had grown up in the church, and so I felt like I had to value those teachings and make them fit my lifestyle. And then when that happened, when that announcement happened, it was no, you have to pick one or the other.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
And was that just kind of what was the gravity? I'm trying to word this the right way, but that that I would imagine would be pretty crushing.
It was
feel
crushing
that,
for
but-
me, and it was crushing for my parents, because I
Yeah.
talked to them about wanting those things for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And after that happened, that's when both of my parents kind of started to fall away from the church a little bit.
Yeah.
And also myself, and then maybe my sisters a little bit too, just because it was, it almost felt like we had to choose.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, I remember him telling me that, because I went back for fall break that October, and he was like, if I have to choose, I choose you. He was like, it just sucks that I have to like make a choice. He's like, why do I have to choose?
Yeah.
You know? Because for my parents, like, 30, 40 years as members of the church, like, that's all they know. That was all my mom knew. That's all my dad knew. And so that was difficult for them to navigate, having a gay son that, felt like he couldn't be a member of the church, and then where they went, what path they took.
Right.
To like, do they follow me and support me, or do they do their own thing? And that was conflicting for them too, and conflicting for my sisters.
Sure.
A lot too.
I bet, and that's so hard, because I've tried to think, like, if I'm in that situation, like if I were to have a son or daughter that came out as bi, like how would I handle that?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's such a hard thing to say, that just like, hey, this is going to be your trial and you're going to have to be celibate, the rest of your life. Like, I don't know. Like,
how do you ask somebody to live that life? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's another reason I'm so interested in having these kind of conversations, is because it's like,
it
I don't
doesn't
know
just
if I'm ready
impact
to-
that one person. It has an impact on so many people. Yeah.
Right, because I'm sure if your parents were members for that long, they had strong testimonies, and it's just like, how do I handle this and love? And because I would imagine by continuing to follow or live in the gospel, it's like they almost feel like hypocritical or something, because it's almost like you would follow it but you can't.
Yeah.
Is that how you were feeling?
Exactly. It's like,
Okay.
it's like you choose between like happiness or complacency, and whoever wants to be just complacent, like who just wants to be like, oh, life's okay, I guess.
Totally.
It just isn't. It's not good enough for me.
Right.
And that's kind of, those were the two paths. I was like, do I, do what I'm expected, or do I do what I want to do, and what I feel like I need to do to survive and be myself? That's kind of where I was at. I
bet. And so naturally, you probably just needed to be in an atmosphere where you felt comfortable.
Yeah, and the U really gave me that atmosphere, I think, more so
Sure.
than I expected. And I was working at H&M too, and
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even need to say anything else about that. You just already know. And so it's just like, I was surrounded by all these people who were similar or just like me, and
Sure.
and I felt more comfortable that way.
Uh-huh.
And I was, and I think that helped me develop into the person I am today. But not everybody has that experience.
Yeah.
And nobody, like, I have really, really supportive parents who have helped me get to where I am today.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people can't escape their small hometowns to experience something different, and they're stuck with, what they have, and sometimes that's just not the best. And if I had stayed in Kaysville, I don't know if I had a lot of support. I did, and I would have been okay, but I felt more free in Salt Lake,
Oh, I bet, dude.
Yeah.
And because I would want to be, because I've gone through even spurts in my own life where I haven't been living the gospel, and I almost found that, like, it's not that I didn't love my old friends, but, like, I almost didn't want to hang out with them because I wasn't comfortable, like, with, like, I knew that my lifestyle would, like, make them uncomfortable,
Right.
And so I think that's totally natural, that you want to be surrounded by people who love and care for you.
And kind of have experienced what you've experienced in some way.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, though, because, growing up, and you believing these values and law of chastity, even though you chose to, like, live that lifestyle, did you ever experience, like, feelings of guilt or, like, even though you decided you're not going to be a part of it or you don't believe it anymore, like what was that like for you?
I did experience a lot of guilt. And I think my first experience with guilt was my senior year. I was secretly dating this guy in Payson.
Mm.
Not a lot of people knew about it. There were definitely some rumors spreading. Okay, the rumors were. I know the rumors. But I remember going out on a couple dates with him. He invited me to his Halloween dance, and we went together. And after that, I felt this overwhelming sense of guilt, and I broke it off with him.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of ghosted him. And I was in the car with my friends, and I was out to them at the time, and I was just like, nope, I can't live this lifestyle. It's just not for me. It's not compatible with my beliefs, and I have to
Mm-hmm.
turn it off. And that worked for about a week, and then we started dating again, and then before we graduated in March, April, I started dating a guy from Viewmont.
Yeah.
And he was out, and so that experience too was like a little different, and I felt like I had to be super careful and secretive,
Uh-huh.
and acting that way, I think, brought on a lot of guilt. I was like, why do I feel like I need to keep this a secret?
Sure.
Oh, because it's bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I also thought maybe my experience at BYU Hawaii would change my opinion in some way or alter my experience, and obviously it didn't. But well, it did, just in a different way. But guilt and fear, I think, were two big
Mm-hmm.
factors that played into.
What was it more like? What would you say you were fearing? Was it like rejection from people you love?
Rejection from people I loved, and rejection from extended family too.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little scared that maybe my grandparents wouldn't accept me, and they were really, really, really supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Both sets of grandparents were really supportive, but I think that was one of the biggest things for me was family. How was my family going to react?
Mm-hmm.
And when I came out to my sisters, they didn't understand it at first either. And it took them just a little while to kind of understand what I was going through, and
Yeah.
but that their understanding came with their experience after they moved out of Utah.
Yeah.
Going to a school, where you don't have the seminary building 2 feet away.
Yeah.
Or do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
for them, they had more exposure to queer people, and I think that kind of helped them open their eyes. But the fear, the fear came from fear of rejection.
I bet. And I'd be interested to hear what your sisters thought, and I'd imagine they've probably shared with you. Is it because I would imagine people almost see it as like a sickness here, where it's like, oh, there's something wrong
Right.
with that person.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like they have this, because I feel like a lot of people don't even know if it's like, are they born with it, or like did they develop it?
Yeah, a lot
right?
of people think that it's like a choice, and my sisters, when I came out to them, Hannah, she's the younger sister, she was like, cool. And then Emily was bawling, she was crying. She's like, I feel so bad for you, like you're gonna face a lot of really hard stuff. She was worried that I was gonna get bullied, and this was even after high school, So, their reactions were just kind of maybe more. She was concerned, and I think that goes for all of my family. On my mom's side, maybe not so much, but my dad's side maybe thought that it was a phase that I was going through, or that I was gonna be able to climb out of it somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that kind of goes around, that it's either a choice or just like a phase that you need to get over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really just not the case.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one thing too is if it were a choice, it took a lot of courage for me to come out in an all Mormon neighborhood with,
Yeah.
Mormon family and extended family and friends. And I think that, I think that if it were a choice, I probably wouldn't have chosen to go through all of that
Yeah.
suffering that I
Yeah.
went. Does that make sense?
Totally. It's like, let me just choose the hardest
Yeah, I'm
road
like,
I can go
okay,
down just
yeah.
for fun.
Right.
No, that makes sense. Well, I think that's so awesome that they were supportive of you and
Super.
like they weren't just like closed-minded, because I think that drives me nuts more than anything is like when people just they don't even want to hear the rationale behind it.
Right.
Like they're just like, oh, like gay, like that's sin.
Yeah.
Or, like I'm just whatever, I can't deal with it.
I know. It's sometimes I feel like maybe people forget that you're like a person
Yeah.
in some way, where they're more concerned about what they've been taught rather than like who you really are or what you have to offer the world.
Yeah.
And so I think that was kind of scary for my parents too, a little bit, trying to navigate when I came out, or like when they told their friends or told their parents about it.
Yeah.
Just like kind of walking on eggshells, because you really don't know how someone else is going to react to this. You know what I mean? Like my mom went out to lunch with all of her friends like right after I came out, like the day after.
Wow.
And they were like, what are you going to do? They're like, what are you going to do? She's like, well, what else can I do except just support him?
Yeah.
And be there for him. And so I think that fear extends to everybody else who is like connected to that person.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, like, and your belief system also has to kind of change a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what my parents were taught had to be altered or adjusted to accommodate for me in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's difficult too. Even for my grandparents, like, to be supportive, you have to really like uproot all of those teachings and kind of say, well, do we support him or do we not support him?
I was gonna say, what do you think the main thing they had to change was?
I just think they had to become more understanding or empathetic,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe see me as their grandson or son versus like a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Because all like in the media, and back then especially, like gay men were kind of portrayed as like these sex crazed, like borderline hookers, or like mentally ill. And I think that media portrayal really impacted the way that they viewed like the queer community just as a whole.
Yeah.
And so to kind of overcome those ideas takes a lot of courage too.
So it's almost like it's hard because there's a lot of stereotypes.
A lot of
behind
stereotypes, a lot of like misinformation. I remember my dad had a couple people like talk to him about gays being pedophiles, which is like a big thing that gets spread out there.
Yeah.
And my dad really had to like fight that really hard. And my dad, he's so cool. He'd listen to podcasts, like LGBTQ plus podcasts, to kind of like gain more of an understanding about who I was and what I was going through.
Yeah.
Because at the time I was still really insecure, and so like for me to just tell them I was gay was almost as much as like I felt they could handle, and almost as much as I shared. Like they didn't know I had a secret boyfriend in high school until I told them I was going to a Halloween dance with him. And I was just like, I'm going, so you better, you better be okay with it because I'm driving down there.
Yeah.
And of course they were, but I think educating too, like my dad listening to those podcasts, like helped him gain a different perspective versus like maybe what you're taught to believe or what the media tells you to believe about the LGBTQ community.
And did it feel like, and I mean, obviously you're kind of speaking for him, but do you think did it more so like debunk a lot of these like stereotypes, or what did that do for him, or did it give him like insight into more so like how to help you or like be supportive of you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was just for him to support me.
Okay.
I think I have a great relationship with my dad, and I think a lot of that is because he took the time to really get to know my community. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, he already kind of knew who I was as a person, but at the time, but more so wanted to get an idea of how he could be supportive and what he could do to be supportive. Because there's really not, for members of the church especially, there's not like a handbook for how do you deal with your gay son. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like you have the for Strength of Youth pamphlet, but that doesn't give you any insight on
it just says it's bad.
Right. Or
right.
And so it's just like for him to go out there and like do some maybe unbiased research as was kind of the goal for him.
Okay.
To gain an understanding of who I was, and then share that with my mom and my sisters and his parents too.
That's really cool. And
it is really cool.
We've mentioned support a couple times, but what did that support look like?
You know, over the years I've watched my relationship with my parents evolve into like a friendship, and that sounds like it's like a step down from being a parent, but in reality it's being a parent and then being your friend.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? There's nothing my dad doesn't know about my life and what I do, which I'm sorry, Dad, but I'm really sorry. But
you're sorry just because you're so open, or what?
Yeah, because I tell him a lot of stuff.
Okay.
But I think for him, and you know, and my family as a whole, it was just kind of I don't know, just really just took a lot of time to get to that place where they like could be 100% supportive. Only because there was the church and then myself and trying to navigate, because it wasn't even just my parents were thinking about me, but they were thinking about what my sisters were going to go through. Like when I came out, after high school, we were still living at our house in Kaysville, and like my home teachers stopped coming, and my sister's friends weren't allowed to come over. Like it was, wow. It was pretty like brutal.
And just ghosted, like they didn't.
Yeah, so like so we had like a group of friends in the neighborhood who are still friends that were super supportive.
Yeah.
But then you get the other side of it too, where people just like want nothing to do with you. And my sisters and my parents went through that. And for me, I was just like, I'm going to be who I don't care. But for them, like my dad was juggling like a job offer in Florida at the time, and I kind of think that was like a big push for them to kind of get out. You know?
Yeah.
And so as far as support goes, it obviously like supporting me and the lifestyle that I live and who I am took some time, because it's the exact opposite of what they expected for me.
Yeah.
And who they saw me as at the time.
So if I'm piecing this together right, it's almost like support. It's almost like where they stop treating you as like a project or like this problem, and instead they're just completely accepted of who you are, what you're doing with your life.
Sure.
And have zero issues with you.
Instead of like telling me what I should be doing, it was more support for what I was doing to where I am now, right? Yeah. But I've watched my parents over the years evolve from more like parenting to just more like, what do you need? Like, like, what are you going through? Like, how can we help you, rather than like, you know, we expect this or we think this, or questions like, why don't you go to church? Do you still pray? Those are questions I get from my grandparents.
Yeah.
Or used to get from my grandparents. I don't get them anymore. But yeah, it's the support system I have took time to kind of build up in some way. But they've always been supportive. I just think what I'm trying to say is that support at the beginning evolved into like more support now. It was like a very gradual process. Because for my parents not expecting maybe to have like a gay son, it was like you can't snap your fingers and then one day be totally 100% accepting.
Yeah.
You know, that's a process. And for my grandparents too, to you know, when I brought partners over, a big transition for them to understand that it wasn't just like a phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so their support had to come with time too, even though they've always been really supportive. The understanding of that support didn't come until later. There we go.
That makes sense. So it's just a process of them being completely accepting of who you are.
Yeah, so like wanting to support but not understanding why at the beginning, and now coming full circle, I'd say, supporting and knowing why.
And knowing why, what would you say the why is?
I think the why was me succeeding and being happy. And I think my parents seeing that helped them cut the why out and just be like, yep, I know. This is what it is.
Right. So keep going.
No,
Sorry.
keep going. Go ahead.
No, the thing that just begs the question is like, did you get people who were like sad for you in the sense of like, oh, he's not going to be living the church lifestyle?
Yes.
And I'm so sorry for you because now you're not going to be getting blessings.
Yes. yes. Maybe more so at the beginning. When I came out, mixed reactions from friends, classmates, adults in my ward.
Yeah.
Most supportive, some not very supportive. One in particular made a Facebook post about me, and it was really a brutal post. So much so that my dad saw it and it made him cry. It was like, she was like, you're the devil. You're going to hell. Like, this isn't the life that Jesus wants for you or God wants for you. It was like pretty upsetting for my parents to read. And then even at BYU Hawaii, I was out there. But the heterosexuality or heteronormative, like, societal expectation in the church was still being pushed on me. Like when I had my, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's the
honor code?
No, it's the, you get the revelation from that person about your life in the future. Patriarchal blessing.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Jeez, wow.
Good, man.
I remember getting that, and in that patriarchal blessing, he said I was going to go on a mission somewhere foreign and then meet a woman and have kids. That was how am I doing? So far, so good?
Yeah.
I think I've got all those things. No, I don't. None of that happened. But I think for me, that was like, I was like, what? That's not what I see for myself at all.
Yeah.
So kind of overcoming that to maybe not so much like not supportive, but it was more so like, nobody understood, and so it was ignored, and this was the life I was going to live. Does that make sense? Or the life that eventually I was going to get to. And I think maybe for my grandparents a little bit too, that expectation stuck for a while. That eventually I was going to wake up and marry a woman and have kids and do that thing, and that's just not the case. So, though I got I got some pushback after I came out, most of the real pushback was just from expectations rather than people. Does that make sense?
Pushback in what way?
Pushback if those expectations weren't there, if I hadn't lived with those expectations up through high school and then a little beyond, my journey would have been a little bit easier or a little less.
Expectations to live the gospel.
Expectations to live the gospel, go to church, go to BYU, serve a mission.
Yeah.
Graduate seminary, fulfill a calling.
Right.
All of those things were things I think that I wanted at the time,
right.
But my lifestyle didn't fit in with that at all.
Yeah.
In any way. And so it was like that transition for me was just like it was just different. It was just a different transition.
Yeah,
you know?
No, that's huge, man. And so I get another big question I'm really curious about. So it sounds like you had some good support from family, clearly, and that you explained that as a process. But where do you think a lot of kids, because there's obviously a huge suicide rate in Utah in the LGBT community, I'd imagine that's a factor of so many things, but where do you think that starts, that people start feeling that way?
I think it starts with family. Because at the end of the day, you know your family better than you know anybody else, right?
Yeah.
And your family knows you, and knowing all of that information, because everybody's situation is different, whether or not they'll support you is like a big player. So my parents nudged me out of the closet. And it took a lot of courage for me to come out, but it's different for me versus somebody who doesn't have parents that are accepting like mine.
I'm going to say a lot probably don't.
Exactly. And so the courage it takes for them to come out, and then that fear of rejection is I can't imagine it because I haven't experienced that. Does that make sense? And as far as friends go, which I think is the next step, all of my friends in high school knew late into our senior year. So that spring was when I really started to tell a lot of people, and that's when
I heard a lot of whispers.
Yeah, people knew that I was up to something and that I was out and about, but they didn't know the details. But I had a really strong, supportive friend group. And they were all members of the church, and all of them have their own experiences with the LGBTQ plus community, right?
Yeah.
Which also impacted the way they treated me, I guess, in a way. And never once did I feel like a lack of support from my friends or their families. My friends and their families were always really supportive.
Yeah.
But again, I felt comfortable because I knew that I was going to be okay to tell my friends those things, and I feel like that there's a disconnect there too, where my experience is different because I've had this amazing support system, where people maybe don't have super supportive friends or super supportive friends with super supportive or understanding families, which is where we had a problem with my sisters not having not being able to have friends over, like some friends over.
Yeah.
Which was like I guess it's a huge example of how that like impacts the queer community.
Right.
Like if you were a member of a family that wasn't supportive, it'd be really horrible and hard to come out and face not only rejection but like total abandonment, which a lot of people
holy cow,
really experience.
And man, with that, the whole thing of not wanting friends to come over, was that ever voiced to you why they didn't?
Mm-hmm. Never well.
Or was it just
we
kind of
knew
assumed?
It was because I was gay, but never more than just that. But that was the root issue. Yeah. And so escaping that was a big thing. Going to BYU Hawaii was a big way to escape, and my sisters and my mom and my dad moving to Florida, a big way to escape. That,
I bet. And so at BYU Hawaii, did you just kind of get to a conclusion of like, okay, this is just not going to work? And that's when you came back decided to go to the U.
Yep. I think out there I was having so much fun. It wasn't really it was a college experience, but it was like a high school college experience because I went down with Morgan and Courtney Eames and Miranda Olcott and Miranda Olcott.
Dude, I was always so jealous. Anymore. You're hanging out with all these cute girls.
My gosh, it was so fun. It was so fun. I get that a lot. Yeah. No. But I forgot the question.
I guess like when you were at BYU Hawaii, you got a sense that like my lifestyle just isn't gonna work.
I did. But I really didn't. There were still. I don't have them anymore. But there were still moments where I was like, can I make it work? Like, can I do this? Up even into the U a little bit. Because when my first semester at the U, I had been living with my grandparents for like a couple months. And they were regularly going to church, and I would go with them sometimes. Yeah. And so it was just like kind of this lingering thing that was like following me around that I didn't necessarily want, but it was attached to me in some way because my family was attached to it. Sure. And so it was just kind of like, how do I navigate myself out of this to learn more about who I am? Because I'm not learning about myself like when I'm in this situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like you needed to be somewhere where you could just authentically dive into who you are.
Yeah, and like that's just like my experience. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And my experience is a lot easier than what a lot of other people go through. Yeah. But that was it was just like, how do I take this piece of my life that I've had for the last 18 years, really, and kind of like push it aside to figure out what I really need to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I had to accommodate for myself because the church wasn't going to accommodate for me.
Interesting. And what has that experience been like?
Crazy. Yeah. Really, 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 really crazy. Yeah. All good. I mean, good and bad, but I don't have any regrets. And I don't hold any anger either, because in reality, most of my coming out experience and most of my support were from members of the church. Yeah. Right? Or former members of the church. Just really, it really highlights that there doesn't need to be such a divide. There doesn't need to be so much confusion. It was more just like outpouring of love than it was like, even though I did get some hate for it, like, that's not my whole experience. Right. Does that make sense?
It's like you had enough support that it could kind of outweigh the backlash that would come from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And how have you felt since you've been more authentic to those feelings and who you are? Because I'd imagine, like, and the reason I ask is because I'd imagine there's probably a lot of, like, turmoil and kind of, like, trying to balance or make this work.
Right.
And then not working and then, what do I do? And yeah.
Well, and like the stereotype of maybe not being able to like be successful in some way at first.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked earlier about that stereotype where, you know, gay men are like party goers, drug users, hookers, like what the media used to portray. It's not that way anymore.
Yeah.
But like trying to show other people that I could be like successful
Mm-hmm.
away from the church, just being myself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like maybe overcoming that stereotype in some way, to say like I'm not partying. Well, I do party, but I'm not like a gay party drug using hooker. I'm a student.
That's not all you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that's what you are, but it's like
No.
that came
That's
out
not
wrong,
all
but
I have to offer the world. No.
It came out totally wrong.
No.
But it's like I know what you mean. It's like
Yeah.
you're not that at all.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
get that stereotype out of your mind, because you know that's not my story.
Yeah.
I still get to do all the things I love. I still I still feel like I have a relationship with God. It's just not the relationship that I think a lot of people know or expect that are members of the church. Yeah, traditional relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Because your journey in life, Mitch, is going to be so much different than mine, and your relationship with God is going to be so much different than mine.
Right.
And that goes for everybody, right?
Totally.
What you do and who you are and how you choose to live your life, that's just between you and God.
Exactly.
Right?
Totally. And I think that's one thing I've realized recently, and I shouldn't say recently, probably over the last year or so. I think I used to be in the mindset that like, oh, if you're not a part of the church, like you're just living a subpar life, like there's no way you're going to fully be happy or whatever, you know?
Yeah,
but
and
I've realized that there's not just one way to live a fulfilling life.
Totally. And like
You know?
most, like some of the kids and like, cause our high school was like, what, 98% LDS, right?
Yeah.
And the select few that weren't, at least that we saw, like, weren't accurate representations of people who are like non-members. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think everybody in the world just maybe has a problem with like stereotypes or like, you know, expectations in some way, and I think it's really just about like not caring and living your life true to yourself. And what you see for yourself, what you want for yourself, and what you want for yourself is different from what I want for myself, and we can coexist that way,
right,
and be happy that way.
But there's zero room to be condescending about my lifestyle is better than yours.
Yeah, like
right?
like that Facebook post that girl sent out, just like
I think I remember that post.
It was
it public?
It was, and it was
Okay.
It was like I mean, like, just completely pointless.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, you know, she gets to live her life the way she wants and the way she chooses.
Yeah.
That should just be on her, and the way I live my life is just on me. Unless I'm a mass like murderer, serial killer, or I'm like, you know, shipping cocaine up here, which is, but like, do you know what I mean? My lifestyle doesn't impact her in any way.
Exactly.
And so like, for her to like post something like that just seems really, counter. It completely takes away what she believes in.
And it does nothing but hurt.
And
you know?
and it alienates, you know, the two of us from ever being able to have like a civil conversation.
Exactly.
About what my experience is. And I think that's the other thing too is that post wasn't necessarily about like just me being gay, but like the choice to be gay and like why God hated me for it. Like for her to tell me that I like I was the devil and that I was going to hell, what does that do for anybody? How does that reflect?
And like, was she hoping you would change from seeing that?
I really have no idea. But what's crazy is she
Yeah.
was my Trek sister too. I
Wow.
knew her, and I had been nothing but nice to her, and
Yeah.
so it was just like it was kind of shocking. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Does
Totally.
that make sense?
Mhm.
And I think that there's the separation there. You're allowed to believe what you want to believe and stick with that. Just don't let those beliefs like hurt or alter somebody else's existence.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that's where people just get so close-minded, where it's like, oh, like, I believe that's sin, so I can't associate with that person. I can't, like they just automatically assume that you're an awful person.
Right.
Where it would be like me as a member of the church looking at someone who drinks alcohol.
Yeah, a non-member, right?
A non-member, and me just saying like, dude, you freaking suck.
Yeah, like,
because
I can't be seen with you.
Yeah.
I can't hang out with you because that's going to say something about who I am as a person.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because you also hear a lot about how different the church is outside of Utah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a no-brainer that the culture here can be a little judgy, right? And I don't say that to be critical. I just state it because that's my experience, and other people experience that who are in the church too, whose beliefs are just a little different from like the standard. Does that make sense?
And do you feel like it's that way because, like, if you have different beliefs, that you're like a minority here?
In a way, yes. And I guess depending on where you grow up too, that is a big thing. Because in Salt Lake, right?
Yeah.
It's like really your experience is going to be a lot different than your experience growing up in Kaysville or in a small town in southern Utah or something like that. You know?
Yeah. So what do you think can be done then? Because there's obviously still a huge issue of people, wanting to kill themselves because of rejection.
Yeah.
And it obviously has to start somewhere to change a community, right?
Right.
And I think we've touched a little bit on that of like, you can't just judge people because they believe something differently than you. But
exactly.
In your experience, what are some other places that people miss the mark?
That's a good question. I think just the way maybe, because not everybody has to, well, let's see, how do I say this? Not everybody has to be okay with who I am. I guess. I don't care, really. Because my life is just my life no matter what, and I'm just going to live it to the fullest. I'm not going to let somebody's beliefs change.
That's super healthy.
That, right? But I think that it's treat others the way you want to be treated. And so I guess take it upon yourself to show that even though maybe your beliefs don't necessarily match with like the members of the LGBTQ community, doesn't mean you can't still be loving and supportive in some way without maybe trying to keep them in the church, I guess. So like let people decide for themselves what's right for them, just like you would decide for yourself what's right for you. And rather than, and this goes for both sides, right? Who am I to judge members of the church?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of anger out there, and not, I mean, everybody's experience in the queer community with the church is different. Mine is going to be so much different from somebody else's who grew up in a smaller town or in a more conservative town or didn't have a supportive family. But I think it's just respect everybody for who they are and appreciate that they live authentically and focus on living your life authentically rather than focusing on how you can maybe help somebody else. I think that's the other thing too, is a lot of people feel like because they think it's a choice or a phase that they can help you overcome that in some way.
Sure.
And it's like, if that is the case, right? Let them figure it out for themselves.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I was gonna ask, like, when you started to like not go to church anymore, or to like you were just you wanted to explore this lifestyle and be authentic. Did you feel like did many people start kind of treating you like a project, of just like inviting you to come to church, or like to like I don't know, like
Yeah.
instead of just like being your friend and just like wanting to hang out still, or
There were some
stuff like that?
instances where I had, people reach out and ask me if I wanted to go to church with them or if I wanted to come to the temple with them. And I wasn't holding a temple recommend at the moment, and so I had to say no. And
Yeah.
even like with family, like going to church and maybe not wanting to be there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But for me, I never really had anybody push super hard to the point where I was like, okay, I need to cut you out or cut you off. Everybody at one point was able to kind of sense that my journey is different.
Yeah.
And just to leave me be. And so I haven't had anybody reach out to talk about me coming to church in a very long time.
Yeah.
Which I think is nice. If I want to go back, I'll go back.
Yeah.
If I woke up one day and I said I'm not gay, it's just yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
But like, do you know what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
my personal journey, and I think
Yeah.
that's where people can be more supportive. Is just be supportive in their journey.
Right.
In a healthy way, of course.
Right.
If I were like acting a fool or being super crazy, right? People should intervene. But if you're just living the way you want to live, and it's not, gonna harm anybody else.
Yeah, if anything,
Does that make sense?
you're a contributing member of society. Like,
Yeah.
You're not like like you said, just a crazy party or
Exactly,
menace.
or exactly. I'm not a menace is a good word, or even a bad example.
Yeah.
Right? I think that kind of scares people too. And I think it scared my sister's friends' parents. Like, what kind of example does Tyler set for our children? Or even like my parents maybe at one point thought, how does Tyler living his lifestyle at the moment impact like Emily and Hannah, my sisters? But then like at the end of the day, people are gonna do what they do, and it's their own like decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like me living my life authentically doesn't really change anybody else's life, except in a way that would be eye-opening, maybe.
Yeah.
Like me being openly gay isn't gonna turn your straight son gay.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Exactly.
It's just like that's just not.
Yeah, because I think that's one thing too. I've wondered, like, because people were freaking out when they legalized, or when Obama made the executive order to legalize gay marriage. People like freaked out about it.
Yeah, they think people see it as an infringement on their right to marry for religious reasons, but marriage is like isn't just solely religious. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not like one
Yeah.
religion practices like the act of marriage. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but like
Right.
I also think people were worried that maybe like the church would become lenient on like, or be accepting of like gay marriages in temples. Or do you know what I'm saying?
I could see that. I remember hearing stuff like that they would be like forced to
and like that's just maybe not the lifestyle some ex-members of the church want. Does that make sense? And it wouldn't even be to be malicious in any way either. If somebody did want something like that, they just want to live happy lives. They just want to be happy. So, yeah,
Yeah.
There you go.
No, that makes
Does
sense.
that make sense?
It does. And because I think I just didn't know how to feel for a long time, because I've had people tell me that, like, oh, you shouldn't even go to, like, gay pride parades. And I was like, why? Like,
Yeah, like what? Like what?
like,
Because
tell me what part of this is, like,
well,
contrary to what I believe. Like, I
like
don't
you
know.
hear people talk about the bubble a lot, the
Mhm.
Kaysville bubble or the Utah bubble, that life is
Yeah.
different outside of Utah. And at gay pride parades, yeah, there are a lot of queer people out there that are more expressive than most. There's lots
Sure.
of alcohol, there's lots of drinking and partying and fun, but that's just the one side that I think kind of gets pushed out there more so than just like people being able to like come together and like
Yeah.
love each other for just who they are. Like, yeah, people drink and party and do all this stuff, but you going to a pride parade isn't going to force you to drink or do drugs
No.
or have, or do whatever, right?
Yeah.
You make that decision on your own, no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And you also get to choose what groups you hang out with, and peer pressure is a thing, right?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, my lifestyle as a gay man isn't to convince other people to also be gay or mischievous or
Right.
anti-LDS in some way at all. My only goal in life is just to be happy, and I think I speak for most people when I say that that's just the case, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe the fear of supporting the queer community comes from the fear that you support like drugs and alcohol, which isn't even a real like thing. People drink and use drugs and have sex all over the world. It's just kind of everywhere. It's not. This isn't new. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not like it's not a gay thing either. It's just a human. Thing.
It's like I almost see it like if you're to support the LGBT community, like in their rights and having legal standing, like I feel like it's no different than if like the Catholic Church was pushing for rights or something in a sense. Like it's just like a group of people with a specific lifestyle that need rights and want to be taken care of,
right?
It's like that wouldn't be less moral of me to support that.
Exactly. But like if I were like part of a gay mob and I was out there like bashing all the straight men like that I saw out on the street, totally different, right?
Exactly.
And the same goes for like supporting members of the LDS church too, cuz a lot of my support even now still comes from members of the church who don't care what I do on a day-to-day basis or who I am or who I love, but they just care about me.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It could be the same the other way around. Members of the church or members of the queer community can be friends with and support members of the church. It's just a matter of like supporting people who, I guess do good.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like when I bring up the like gay mob, gay bash, like kind of thing, right? Like obviously it would be hard to support me if I were like a member of like a violent gang. But I'm not. I'm just a regular person just trying to make it in life and and live and you're the same. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And here we are sitting at this table having a nice, awesome conversation, and we'll go our separate ways and live our lives on after this.
Sure.
And there isn't anything negative that comes out of this, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's like me and you are the exact same in the sense of like we both want to be happy. We're both trying to contribute to society.
Mm-hmm.
We both are trying to find peace in life. And at the end of the day, we both want to be treated as friends.
Yeah, and you don't need to step on anybody to get there. And you don't need to, try to change somebody to get there. Your
Right.
journey is yours just alone.
Because it's like, imagine it's the opposite, where it's like I were to live in a gay community and I come out as like the only member of the church, right? And then everyone's trying to convince me that I'm wrong.
That you're
and
wrong,
whatever.
and then they alienate you.
I
and
alienate
Mitch
me.
is the devil. No,
You know?
you know what I mean?
It would be no different.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
It'd be no
and
different.
it would be hard too.
So I think one of the big things I'm taking away from this conversation is support is I'm going to treat you as a friend unconditionally, like regardless of your lifestyle and the choices you make. Like obviously, like I want to be friends with people who are good people, you know.
Yeah, and I think everybody wants that.
Exactly, and I'm gonna treat you like a good friend. I mean, I would treat you like a good person regardless.
Totally.
I hope I would, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like support looks like I'm gonna be your friend regardless of the life choices you make.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right.
No matter like who you are or what you're doing, it's none of my business until you like kill one of my family members and like scalp me and like kidnap my dog. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what you do in your life is just you for you. That's what you do, it's what you choose, it's what you believe in, and just stick with that. And I'll stick with mine, and we can be neighbors and best friends and support each other. You know what I mean?
1000%.
Yeah.
1000%. And I think what's so hard and what I can't fathom is like, you know, people being alienated and hated on for their lifestyle. Like homophobia is like, in my mind, like no different than like racism. You know, it's people being treated different for no other reason.
For no other reason than just because of the way they look or who they are, what they believe in. Even, you know, you can add religious persecution to that, too. The Mormons fled from mobsters and gangs in Illinois. Is it Nauvoo?
Just from the east,
Yeah, and
all the way.
And so take that as you will. If they had been treated with respect and dignity, you know, what would the church look like today? And you know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, it's just everybody deals with discrimination in some way, and I think that I think having empathy and sympathy for those people helps you just maybe not care about what other people are doing, just focusing on yourself at the end of the day.
100%, man. Well, Tyler, I'm so grateful you came on, dude, because I told you I watched a documentary last night. I always forget his name, the lead singer of Imagine Dragons, who was he was a member of the church, right? And put on the Love Loud concerts that are, you know, super popular in Utah when COVID's not a thing. But dude, it breaks my heart because, you know, me being, you know, a straight white male, you know, I've never dealt with persecution other than when I was a door-to-door salesman and everyone hated me.
Oh my gosh. You know? Summer sales.
Don't worry, I don't do that anymore. But dude, like it made me get emotional just because like I felt like me coming from a place of, you know, not being persecuted for, you know, homophobia or whatever. Like, I've been in a low spot, not quite like suicidal, but just like where I hated everything about me and felt like an outcast.
Right.
And I just can't imagine how it would feel to just be an outcast from your family and friends. And, you know, there's a reason people feel lonely. Like, you don't want to feel that way.
No, nobody wants to feel that way.
I know there's so many people out there who need help and need to feel that love and support like we've talked about. And I'm grateful you've got it. And hopefully the people listening to this, parents or people who have friends, you know, who are in a similar situation as you, Tyler, I hope they offer that same kind of support.
I hope so too.
So I guess just in closing, Tyler, is there any, you know, shout outs you want to give or advice or things you want to say to finish up here?
Shout out to my dad because he's awesome. He's like my best friend. And just live your life and be happy.
Well
How about
said,
that?
my friend.
All right.
And Tyler, where can people find you if they want to reach out and ask questions?
You can find me on Instagram. Period. Thank you. and in Seattle too. There you go.
And in Seattle.
And in Seattle.
That's right.
There we
That's
go.
Right. Well, Tyler, thanks again, man, for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Make sure to like and subscribe.
Okay.
Well, peace out, everybody.
Peace out.
Okay.
Hey, thank you. That's
Tyler,
awesome.
You're the freaking man.
You're
Thank
awesome.
you so much.
Thank you so much. Seriously.